Welcome back to the Sacred Arts Podcast, where we talk about all things from the sacred to the practical. I'm so excited to have our guest, Jack Schaefer, here with us today to talk about finding balance between martial arts and holistic medicine. Jack Schaefer is a Colorado native and founder of Mountain West Wellness Advanced Acupuncture. With over 24 years of experience, he is a board certified acupuncturist and herbalist. Jack's journey into Chinese medicine was influenced by childhood acupuncture treatments and martial arts mentors. He pursued advanced studies in China and completed a residency in, you're going to have to help me with this one, Nanjing.
Nanjing, yeah, yeah.
Nanjing. Alongside running his clinic, he teaches at Southwest Acupuncture College and is featured speaker of the Lotus Institute of Integrative Medicine. Jack specializes in pain management, women's health, and herbal therapy, and is deeply involved in Daoism. Known for his thoroughness, he is dedicated to helping patients achieve wellness outside work. He enjoys time with his son, outdoor activities, and martial arts. Welcome, Jack.
Hey, thanks for having me. That's amazing, and I hope I can live up to that bio.
Uh, it's very interesting. Obviously, your passion is around wellness. And, I have a beautiful relationship with acupuncture, so I can definitely attest to the benefits
Cool.
and how healing it has been for me. But I'm really interested in what inspired you to pursue a career in Chinese medicine, particularly around acupuncture and herbal therapy.
Oh, that's a long question. You know, I'll tell you, so I like you had mentioned in the bio, I grew up doing martial arts and I'd had lots of natural medicine as a kid and, into my teens and 20s and whatnot. And I had this particular martial arts teacher who he made a really big point when I was just starting college. He said, if you're going to learn how to do these things where you have the potential to hurt people, you need to learn how to have the potential to help people. He said, you have to balance this. You can't just live that one way for a lot of reasons. I mean, for him, there was a spiritual component to that, trying to not get too involved in just the violence of martial arts, but also make sure that you learn how to help people and take care of people. And there was a practical side of it too, because he was really grooming me to be a teacher and wanted me to be able to help my students and whatnot. And so I said, well, this sounds good. And I got really interested in it. And I looked at medical schools and I started applying to medical schools and I applied to Chinese medicine school and Western medicine school and, all chiropractic school and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't really know what kind of medicine I wanted to do. I just knew I was interested in going that direction. And then while I was sort of in the midst of that whole process, I had a really bad knee injury. And so I went and I got evaluated by a surgeon. And the surgeon was just, I don't know, being an impetuous 20 something, we didn't connect. He made me just really not trust him. And I was just like, I don't want this person to touch me. So I decided I'll just do natural stuff. I'm not going to die from a knee injury. So I did acupuncture and a lot of exercises and took a lot of supplements and herbs and I never ended up having to have surgery. And that really struck a chord with me that, wow, okay, there's another way to do this. And I really started analyzing myself and my own temperament. And I realized, one, if I went into typical allopathic primary care, I didn't really want to do that because I would end up referring most people out or writing prescriptions. And I really wanted people to feel better when they left my office. And I knew the system wasn't really conducive to that. And I didn't really have the temperament to be a surgeon. I didn't see myself, doing surgeries. So that left few options to make people feel different when they left my office versus when they came in. And because I'd been getting so much acupuncture, I realized, well, I'm going to look closer at this. Simultaneous to that time, this teacher had a friend, and their friend's family in Taiwan invited me to come live with them if I wanted to and learn their family's style of medicine and whatnot. And so I started investigating that. And I was talking to my dad at the time, and he said, well, if you go, can you practice when you come back? Can you start a clinic? And I checked, and it was really difficult to get a license to practice with a foreign apprenticeship. So I just decided, well, I'll just go to school, and then I can, you know, go to China and wherever else I want to after I graduate. And so that basically, the next thing I knew, I was in school, and the whole thing took on momentum from there. And so I went to school and I got my degree, and then I went to China and spent time there, and I came back and I went to school again and just kind of kept going. So I can't say like there was a defining moment, but I can say there was a lot of momentum, to
Mm.
answer your question. You know,
I
a personal resonance.
It's so funny how that works out for most of us, right? We all have
Yeah.
like this big plan, and it's like, no, like our life somehow in our experiences takes us through different things that allows us to be on our path. And I love the intention behind why you went into this. It was first, if I heard correctly, it was first to find balance in your life between martial arts and the violence of that, and helping people, and really bringing your service to humanity. And then after that, like on that path, it wasn't about the title, it wasn't about the money or whatever. It was about actually aligning with what you believed in, and
Mm.
it really aligned with who you were at the core, because you found something that was your medicine that really spoke to you, and really helped heal you. And I could totally understand a knee knee injury, because that's why I tried acupuncture. I was limping at 35, and I was like, I can't believe that I'm limping at 35. What's it going to be like when I'm in my 60s? And I really need to find an alternative way other than surgery and things like that. So I can absolutely appreciate your story as well. I want
Yeah. I said, yeah. I mean, I think, it's funny too, because even when I had gone to school, I wasn't 100% sold on whether I would be a good clinician or, um, I just knew I needed to do it. But I had really great mentors, and as time went, I really was like, wow, I have a knack for this. I have a talent for it. And, you know, it, and underlying all of that, really what there was an exposed passion.
mm,
You know, I really, I really saw like, wow, this is a way to really help people. And, helping people ends up being one of the finest, most powerful ways of resolving karma, is helping other humans. And so, you know, that just became something that I realized, wow, I just need to keep doing this. And from there it went. I can't even speak about it.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you pretty much surrendered and trusted that path, because I feel like most of us, myself included, no matter how much passion there is, if there is resistance for whatever reason, and it sounds like there was a bit of resistance in you questioning whether this was your path, and how you were going to go about this, um, the resistance can really take us down a different path. And, the universe has a way to like show us that it's not our path. And so it sounds like you really surrendered into it, and so lucky to have such great mentors and powerful mentors that were able to guide you during that time in your life.
Yeah, it was, you're right. The surrender is a big thing. I remember I was sitting with, one of my meditation teachers at the time. He was also my bone setting instructor, and we were meditating, and he always liked to do these little talks, and before meditation, sometimes after. And he was doing this discussion on Daoism and the Tao and whatnot. And he told this little metaphor, and the metaphor always sticks with me. He said, you know, we are, as humans, we're stuck in a river, and that river is going somewhere no matter what. We can't stop the river. You're in the water and you're going with the current. And he says you have a couple of choices. He said you can face upstream and try and swim against the current as hard as you can, but the river is still going to win. It's still going to take you downstream no matter what. but you're looking upstream. And so you're going to hit rocks and logs, and you'll never be happy and it'll never be comfortable. He said, or you can look downstream and you can swim with the current. And if there's an obstacle coming your way, you just paddle to the left a little and go around the obstacle. And if there's a new obstacle, you paddle to the right, but you know you're in this river, you know where you're going, and you just go with it. And that's something that's always stuck with me, trying not to fight the momentum of life, but to try and really go with it. Now, I'll confess, saying that sounds much easier than it really is. And, you know, I'm that particular teacher, he had his own issues too. I mean, we all struggle and we all fight the current from time to time. But if we're at least looking downstream and going with it, there's some real benefit to it. So,
I have tears in my eyes because I feel like that's a message I really needed to hear.
mm,
I feel like life can take us down such weird paths or, unexpected paths, I should say. And it's hard to surrender. It is hard to go with that flow. And you giving us that analogy, I think it helps to paint a picture of what surrender really looks like. Because for a long time, I just rejected that word. I would like clench up anytime somebody would say, it's like, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? I don't understand that concept because I'm so used to controlling everything. That's how I built all of my success, through control and planning and control.
yeah.
So
Well, and surrender sounds so passive,
yeah.
right? Like you're just giving up. And
Yes.
I don't think it's that, because you still have to swim, and you get to make some decisions. You just
Yes.
don't fight the big stuff.
Yes. I love that. Thank you. Oh,
Sure.
I learned something new today, or you inspired me today. So, and that's what this podcast is all about. So
Oh,
I'm happy.
oh, I'm glad.
You mentioned Taoism, right?
Mm,
How do
yeah.
you integrate the Taoist principles into your Chinese medicine or into your acupuncture practice?
Oh, that's a super interesting question, because there's a lot of ways we can look at Taoism. Taoism remember, it's a religion. And so um, it's basically, you could think about it as the indigenous religion of China. And it contains aspects of Buddhism and Confucianism and sort of native Taoist thought and whatnot. And there's a few ways to think about like how I integrate it into my practice in my clinic. Because as a person, I'm an ordained Taoist priest, and I've spent a lot of time in China, studying Taoism in temples. And we have my partner Josh Painter and I, we run another organization called Parting Clouds Taoist Education, and that's an opportunity for people all over the world to learn Taoism in English. And we take students to China, and we run classes and whatnot. And so there's lots of layers, I guess, to what that means to me to integrate it into the clinic. There's um, lifestyle. So what people a lot of times think of as lifestyle, which would be, you know, um, physical practices or diet or whatnot. But also a large part of it is behavioral and sort of being in alignment with what we think Tao is. So, the one way to think of what the Tao is, and granted, this is just one small aspect, but we consider it to be something like cosmic goodness, like this goodness that underlies everything in the universe. And so then what we try and do is we think, well, how can I be in alignment with that? So how can I be in alignment with goodness? So in my clinic, that can mean a lot of things. It can mean how I charge patients. It can mean how the kind of attention I pay to them or don't pay to them. The kind of example I set as a person, in my interactions with them, but also in the recommendations that I work with them. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll start talking about illnesses, and there's a psycho-emotional aspect to almost all illnesses.
Mhm.
And one Taoist cure to these psycho-emotional aspects is also to engage in sort of virtuous or benevolent behaviors. They have like a canceling out effect. So somebody who has frequent chronic anger, that can lead to physical disease.
Mhm.
And one of the ways we counter frequent chronic anger is by engaging in sort of benevolent behavior, so, being generous, being giving, being kind, that can counter out the anger towards an individual, but it also counters out the physiologic and the karmic sort of crash of the anger. Because anger usually, as an example, starts to become built around illusions that we create in our own mind, and the stories we start to write life and the problems. Rocks, I'm not even looking at the rock, I'm looking upstream, but I'm not catching on to that. So it's like the rock's fault. And we get angry about that, and we realize that's an illusion. The rock had no fault. All I had to do was turn around. And so we use things like benevolence as an example to counter anger. And
Mhm.
so sometimes we'll talk about, just using things like that as an emotional aspect with illnesses. Not everybody is willing to go there.
Yeah.
So I have to really finally choose who I say those things to.
Yeah.
I'm not a counselor, so I also don't like to get into psychology. That's a real slippery slope. The other side of Taoism that I engage in or enter into my clinic is what we call Taoist medicine. And Taoist medicine it's a spiritually based medicine. I actually just published an article about this in the Journal of Taoist Studies. And it has a lot to do with using celestial forces as a way of finding a cure. So I think we would think of it as like cure through prayer, you
Yeah.
know. But so we'll use, talismanic rituals and things like that to work with certain kinds of problems.
Which is really
I don't,
powerful. I mean, there's
yeah,
tons of studies on intention and prayer and yeah, really interesting stuff.
it really is interesting. And it's one of those things that's always amazing to watch it work. And
Hmm.
so those are the things I use for certain kinds of situations. They're definitely not an everyday thing where somebody's got, a cold. I wouldn't do that for a cold, but I might do it for somebody who's having roadblocks in their life or, you know, um, things that just aren't changing the way they should be. We might engage in Taoist medicine in that regard.
I want to thank all of our Patreon members for supporting the podcast and making all of this so possible. When you join the Patreon for just $3 a month, you support the learning and continuous programming of this podcast. Join today to get insights on before and after conversations, extra footage, and extra episodes. Join today on Patreon. I want to go back a little bit to what you said about anger and curing that with benevolence, because when I think of those two things, I think of them on a frequency spectrum, right? So if I'm at a certain frequency and am in anger, it's kind of really hard to see beyond my nose and really like flip over to benevolence, right? And make that conscious choice of like, I'm not going to be angry about this. Instead, I'm going to go and be generous to someone or tap into my benevolence. What, how do you coach someone through that has this chronic anger and that's the only frequency they know how to be in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, first is we have to acknowledge that it's not easy, you know, that it takes um, extreme patience and effort. But the the thing about it is that we have to take it a step backward in that, in the Taoist sort of point of view, there's sort of two sides to us as a person. There's the side to us that we think of as like our celestial being, it's a celestial mind and sort of a celestial body. It's the part of you that's enduring, that gets reincarnated life to life, etc. And then there's the physical body and the physical mind that you are residing in right now, the vessel for that. And the vessel is, we have to be in it, and we have to deal with our entanglements because of that, families and friends and jobs, and those are entanglements that can't really be completely avoided. But we have to realize also that that vessel isn't the true us. So we call it the illusory body or the illusory mind. So, like when I look at myself on the screen right here, this person I see isn't really the true me. The true me is that celestial, body that goes from lifetime to lifetime incarnated, And this me is the product of, my parents and where I was born and the kind of life I lived. And some of it are things I can't control, like, my race or whatnot in the country I was born in. And some of are things I can control, like whether I, decide I want to live on Girl Scout cookies and whether I want to be a jerk. And we consider that sort of thing as an illusion because it's not required. The illusion is something that we just can choose to believe. Like I can't stop myself from eating cookies. Of course I can, I can't stop myself from being mean. Of course I can, because those are illusions. So we have to go a step back and realize, one, my true nature is not one of anger. My true nature is actually one of benevolence and kindness, because that's what's in alignment with the Tao. So all of these other things then, because they're an illusion, I need to and should learn what entanglements cause that. And so those are usually, we think of them as related to, for example, desire, is a big one. Desire for or against something. And then that place where desire maybe meets the object of the desire and our senses and whatnot. And so when we slow down, we have a chance to explore that. We usually explore that through meditation, because when you're sitting there trying to meditate, if you've ever tried to meditate, I'm sure your listeners and you have before, there's those things, your mind just starts to be flooded with thoughts. And we just spend a little time interrogating those as, oh, that thought isn't even a real thing. It's just a thought. So the thought about the thing that hasn't happened is still an illusion too. And so we start to explore that stuff. And for whatever reason, they start to melt a little bit. And we realize, oh, yeah, you know what? That person that I really have, that neighbor that I have a real problem with, I realize they're also another person, and they have their own issues. And maybe they don't like me so much either. And, those sorts of things. And so I think to go back to your question, one of the best things we can do is slow down, like spend some time meditating and just interrogating those thoughts and those feelings. And we can see that they always have a root in something, and that root has a root in something. Eventually, we realize most of them are just illusions,
I love how you just explained that, because I mean, I have the same opinion or the same experience as you do, but the way that you word it gives a different perspective, and it's very refreshing. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
I want to get a little bit into Qigong because I just
sure.
recently discovered Qigong, like probably a year and a half ago, and it has been so instrumental in, I lost my grandmother in 2022, and she's
Um,
the matriarch of our family, and it really helped with processing grief. And that's just my personal experience. So I'm curious to know about, can you discuss the role of Qigong in promoting health and wellness, both personally and in your practice?
yeah, absolutely. Qigong is such an interesting topic. There's a lot of mystery and stuff around it, and some of it, as much as people try to research it, I don't know that we can ever really totally understand what's going on there.
I agree.
But yeah, because there's the problem with it is Qigong. One of my friends used to use this metaphor, and I'm going to steal it from him. But Qigong is like the word car, in that there are lots of kinds of cars.
Mm.
There's pickups and vans and sports cars and electric cars, and each car has a different purpose. So a van is for moving things, and a sports car is for whatever a sports car is for, and so qigong is like that, in that all qigong systems or forms aren't for the same thing. And so I think whenever we learn a qigong form, I think we have to have two sort of pieces in our mind, like what do I want to get out of it, and then what is this particular one meant to do for me?
Mm.
And we can simplify that down, because in martial arts, for example, there are qigong systems that are designed to make you really hard, and you've probably seen like videos of like Shaolin monks where they're getting hit with things and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're meant just for that, but that won't necessarily make you healthy. And there are qigong systems that are really meant for curing diseases, so specific diseases, like there's a whole series for cancer, for example.
Mm.
And then there are some that are just like general wellness, that are just, you practice them when you're healthy to keep you more vibrant and more healthy. And so as a clinician, I tend to think about those types of practices the most. My martial arts students will learn some of the other things, but there's no free lunch with those, and they don't always lead to health, you know.
Mhm.
But the ones that are meant for health or specific diseases, those are the ones I lean into with my patients. And so I usually look at two types of them. We'll use that form that's really built for wellness as kind of an ongoing thing. If people are open to it and they want to learn it, I can give it to them via video course, or sometimes I'll do workshops. And then that's the kind of thing they do when they're staying healthy. But some people, if they've got like chronic hip problems or something, we may actually just teach them an abbreviated form that's based on that problem to
Mm.
help move chi and blood through that area and decrease inflammation and whatnot, so that it can heal better. I think it's a really, that's the primary way I tend to think of them now, and that's how I use them myself. I look at them more like medicines, rather than an exercise. So it's like I need this kind of medicine as part of my daily thing, or something like that.
It's so interesting you say that, because for some reason, right, the universe works in mysterious ways, because when I really needed it the most was when I was grieving my grandmother, and that's what kept popping up for me. And commercials or ads on qigong, and I would be like honing in on it, like, what is this? And I would research, and I'm like, I don't understand,
Yeah.
what this is for. And then all of a sudden I really honed in on the grief qigong. There was like a
Mm.
whole series that White Tiger,
Mhm.
one of those online places, was giving, and man, did it really help, because I was in a place where I wasn't able to cry. I wasn't able to release the grief, and it was kind of turning into anger. And I knew, like, I wanted to cry, I wanted to release it some way, somehow, and qigong really, really helped with that release. And I've lost many people in the past, but nobody like my grandmother. And so I thought this was going to hit me the worst, and I think I was just stuck in it, like a state of shock. And qigong was just a beautiful practice to take on. And you're
Mm.
so right, like, to compare it to the cars, and understand that it's not just an exercise, it's not just like a practice you just pick up willy-nilly. It's about like really doing your research and understanding what's going to be the most beneficial for where you're at in that moment. Is it going to be for, something you're working on health wise, something emotionally? Maybe you need some sort of like uh not exercise, but movement within your day. And there's even stuff that they have like around the elements and connecting to the element. It's just so beautiful to kind of see. And I love that you described it in this way, because it really isn't about like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go take like a yoga class, or a Zumba class. This practice, this qigong practice, can be life changing and transformative.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it it can really, really, especially when people um, really open themselves up to it, really make massive changes. one of my first teachers, I'll give you a story about her. She was she was a college professor in Beijing, and she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and the cancer had metastasized, and she had had a double mastectomy, and she was having kidney disease. And the doctors told her she would probably only live about 6 months. And so she was, this would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. And she was in her 50s at the time. So she had just kind of accepted that that was going to be her fate, but she didn't want to stop teaching. So she kept going to school, to the university and teaching. And one day she noticed there was a Qigong group, and she stopped and started talking to them, and turned out they were all cancer survivors. And so they invited her to practice with them. And so she started practicing. And at the time, she was still pretty raw from her surgery. So she couldn't lift her arms up very well and whatnot. But she said, what do I have to lose? And so she started practicing with them, and she became really dedicated and was practicing a lot. And she never died. In fact, she's still alive. She lives in California now. She immigrated to the United States, and she travels around the world and teaches, and she's the most vibrant little fireplug of a person. And I'm amazed by her as a human. And she personally was full of stories like that from people that she knew. And so I think, when we open ourselves up to possibility, we can transform grief, or maybe, save ourselves from some life-threatening thing that was supposed to kill us, or maybe even just keep us from getting colds all the time or something. It's
Yeah.
pretty remarkable.
It's so true. I think that the power of the brain paired with our spirituality, whether you believe in God, universe, higher
Mhm.
self, whatever the case may be, right? Paired with like active, you know being active, I think has a lot of power. And I also have a couple of stories of cancer survivors that cured themselves, like just by having a practice like qigong or whatever the case may be. And it's such a powerful thing, and I love hearing stories like that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and I've seen it personally a couple of times. One of my other teachers cured himself of cancer, you know, in he said he cured himself of cancer in the 90s just through taking herbs and doing his qigong practices. And it stayed away until he got pretty old, and then he got sick again, and the cancer came back. But yeah, it was remarkable, really
Yeah,
remarkable.
beautiful. As a doctor of Chinese medicine, how do you navigate the balance between, the traditional approaches and the modern advances in healthcare?
That's an interesting question, and I think it's a really valuable topic because there, I think there's a lot of contention in both camps for each other, which I think is unnecessary. For me personally, I look at medicine like a continuum. On one end is like eat an apple, and on the other end might be surgery or chemotherapy or something. And all the different modalities kind of sit somewhere on that continuum. And so, maybe it's apples and diet and massage and, chiropractic and Chinese medicine, and you kind of work your way up towards medications and surgeries and whatnot. I think the issue a lot of times is that people, they jump too far up the continuum too quickly. So they jump right into a medication when maybe something less powerful or less aggressive, maybe is a better way to think of it, would work. So, you because we see a lot of times that you can fix things with diet. I was having a conversation with a patient this morning who, his doctor told him he has he's like on between pre-diabetes and diabetes, and he wants him to start taking metformin. And he's like, this is the protocol. You're too close to diabetes. Let's do metformin, blah, 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 blah. And the conversation today was really, he said no to the doctor. How about I work on my lifestyle? And 3 months, so this was 3 months, his checkup, and his A1C went down just by following a really good, clean diet. And it wasn't even food jail, but it was just eating lots of vegetables, protein, cutting out the soda and all these other things.
Yeah.
That was a pretty small intervention. If he had gone on metformin, most people don't come back off of medications. They usually are on them. And so I think my encouragement with people usually is, unless it's life threatening, let's start and work our way up the continuum
Hmm.
and see what we can do. So um, a lot of times I embrace aspects of Western medicine or modern allopathic medicine, even in my Chinese medicine practice, because, for example, sometimes people, I'll have them bring in blood work or order blood work for them, and I want to see what certain numbers look like, and we can kind of translate that into Chinese medicine terms. And so it's like, well, let's, instead of this medication or this regime of medications, let's see if we can do this naturally first. And if it's not strong enough, then maybe you can go to medications.
Hmm.
And that's pretty effective. It's an effective use of one of Western medicine's most powerful tools, which is diagnostics.
Hmm.
The imaging, lab tests,
Hmm.
all those things are really, really useful, but we don't have to do the associated treatments necessarily.
Hmm.
We can get away with, like this patient I was just talking about, he got away without even taking herbs. He doesn't like Chinese herbs, but he's happy to do diet,
Yeah.
and it worked just fine. And he didn't want to take the medications. So I think that not approaching allopathic medicine with contention, but I really like to use the tools from it that are effective. I use MRIs and X-rays all the time for my acupuncture stuff, especially for orthopedic things, because if I can see where a disc is bulging in somebody's back, for example, it can really help me more effectively treat it.
Mm. I love your point of view on that because as a patient, that's exactly how I operate. I have free will and I have my own discernment. I can absolutely consult with my regular physician, and they're always trying to put me on drugs, and I'm just like, okay, what are some alternatives? So I go see my acupuncturist who's also Chinese medicine based, and I see my energy healer, and I also go to my holistic doctor and see what alternatives there are. I'm not for the diet, I'm more for the Chinese herbs, so I'm opposite of your patient.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And it's all about like what my preference is and what's going to help me, what I think is going to help me the most. I think you're absolutely right when you say, like, most people that go on medication, you can't really stop the medication without having an adverse effect or something else happening, right? And so really using your free will and discernment to understand, like, what are all of your options, because I think that there's limited knowledge out there, that there's more than just your regular physician, because that's what's like mainstream, that's what everybody says you should do, that's what your insurance covers. So some people don't even have like the resources to go to a holistic practitioner or an acupuncturist like yourself. And
Yeah.
so, what I really like to voice to people when they come see me, even as an energy healer, is, you got to have like a team of people and really exhaust your resources and figure out what's going to work out for you as an individual, right? And I love
Yeah, I
that.
agree. I agree. We have to be our own advocate so much, because it's really unfortunate, but I think in both the natural medicine sphere and the allopathic medicine sphere, there's so much contention
Yeah.
that a lot of times people are left, one, feeling bad about themselves
Yeah.
by one practitioner or the other. And that doesn't aid healing in any way. But the other thing too then is it leads to a little bit of dishonesty from the patient side with, hey, I'm trying these herbs or I'm trying this medicine, and can we work together with that?
Hmm.
And then they maybe keep secrets from one
Yeah.
doctor or the other. And that that actually can lead to problems, you know. But the biggest problem is it just gets in the way of healing, because then people are not, they're in a dishonest place with their illness and with their cures.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, it'd be great if we had some sort of case manager who worked on the patient's behalf and communicated with all the providers,
Yeah.
and would bring that all back together and help keep things on the same page, like a
It's,
kind of like a doula for
yes.
like regular healthcare or something.
I would
But
love that because it's so funny. I mean, I've had a few cancer patients come see me and
yeah,
I'll like recommend some things that have worked for me, and I always say like, here are my recommendations. Please talk to your physician. Please talk to your doctor. And then I'll ask them the next time around, like, what did your physician say about this? Right. And so
yeah,
I try to be that advocate without being in the middle, and try to have those conversations going, because it's so important to have this communication. Some people come see me and they're like, oh, you're so great, I'm going to stop seeing my therapist. And I'm like, no, 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 no. This has to go in conjunction with your therapy because I'm not licensed. You need to have the conversations that we have together so that they have input and we're all kind of working together. But you're right, there is some contention. Some of it has to do with capitalism and
mm,
keeping people on certain medications and things like that. But I think that there are so many physicians out there that are willing to open that door and are willing to have those conversations with their patients if the patient brings it up.
yeah. And I think, the the idea, if that were possible on an easier basis, I think we get better results because, for example, curing a problem, I think about it like a pie, you know. So you've got this pie, and each provider is sort of putting some pieces back into the pie
Yeah.
and filling it in. And so what you don't want are two practitioners going after the same piece, like,
Yeah.
the Western doctor is giving you a sleep aid, and then your Chinese medicine doctor is giving you another sleep aid. That's
Yeah.
two sleep aids that they're both after the same piece, so the whole rest of the pie is being neglected.
Yeah.
But what if you realize, okay, well, fine, use that sleep aid for just a little while, but let's work on the rest of this pie. And then maybe that doctor can relinquish that control of that piece of pie. Then you can use something else for that pie. And pretty soon you don't even need the pie at all, you
Hmm.
know? But all the pieces have to be filled in, not just going after the same piece. And if nobody, much less the patient, is communicating about that, you want, worst case, you run into trouble. Best case, you get some results, but maybe they're not lasting because things are being ignored.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I could talk about this forever. I'm curious to know if somebody is looking to incorporate Qigong or even look for an acupuncturist or incorporate Chinese medicine. Do you have any advice for someone that is looking into these three things and how they can get started?
Yeah, I mean, almost every, as far as Qigong goes, almost every town, has somebody teaching it now. It's really, it's not as ubiquitous as yoga, but it's out there. And so you can just Google it in your town and you can see what's available. I would say, um, with Qigong, I would go back to my earlier point about it. You you want to have two things in mind. What do I want out of it? And how does it work to get me there? So if the person says, well, this one is for, we teach this for, just well-being and wellness, but you're like, well, I have like MS, and this is a chronic serious thing for me. Maybe you need a different kind of teacher. So that's one thing I would do, is just keep the how and the whys forward in your mind. And then the second thing I would consider is, um, just get to know the person a little bit. Watch a class, ask some questions, ask how long they've been doing it, and because there are problems that people get doing qigong, that you can get illnesses from it. Most often they're mental illnesses, not physical. But there are whole papers and books written about this kind of thing in Chinese, and So you want to make sure the person has a significant amount of experience teaching it, but it's pretty easy to find. There are lots of online classes. Like I know you mentioned that you engaged in one, and some of them are really good, you
Yeah.
know? And so um, you can always just look and see what's out there and see what one resonates with you. The only downside of the online stuff is that sometimes it's really fun to do with other people.
It is.
Yeah.
I live in a small town in California and there
Mm,
isn't a Qigong instructor. I thought about being a Qigong instructor and it takes a lot of
mm,
discipline. So I'm not ready to commit to that yet. But you're right. Like I couldn't find somebody nearby. There was a lot of Tai Chi, but that's not what I
mm,
was looking for. I really wanted Qigong. And so I ended up on the online course and I took a few, like I took 4 or 5 of them and I really connected with the white tiger one. And it
mm.
was just so easy. It was such an easy
Cool.
practice. But you're right. It is funner to do it in a group and to connect with other people and be in that energy, right? And it's something that I really needed, so I did it on my own, but if you're able to get a group together and or go to a live studio, then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I
gold.
think, one thing that's effective is if you can have a practice buddy, you know, like one of your friends or a family member who will kind of do it with you, that always helps.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah, and as far as Chinese medicine goes, the United States, there are licensing for Chinese medicine in almost every state. And so finding acupuncturists and practitioners isn't always super hard, but we're all really different people, depending on
Yeah, I
where we went
agree.
to school and our interests and whatnot. But I would say this, like when it comes to practitioners, a lot of people will say they specialize in, and then they'll give a whole litany of things. And, you know, as I think that's actually difficult. Specialize means that's mostly what you do.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say, well, I specialize in OBGYN and I specialize in liver problems and I specialize in digestive problems because I don't, the average practitioner in the United States doesn't see that many patients in a day. So how many are they really seeing? Because specialization is based on experience.
Hmm.
You know, like like for example, in the hospital in Nanjing, I would usually see 50 people just for cancer before lunch.
Mm,
So it's like it's one way to spend a lot of time on one thing. United States, most practitioners, the average American acupuncturist doesn't see 50 people a week, and they're all different problems.
hmm.
So I think maybe a lot of people should say they're passionate about treating this, this, and this. But so if you have a thing that you want help with, a particular problem, what I would do is I would interview practitioners
Hmm.
and just find, 2 or 3 that when you look at their websites that you seem like you can kind of connect with them, and then just ask them, you know, there's nothing wrong with asking point blank, how much of this have you seen? And, have you seen good results with it? And, you can tell by their answer if they're being honest and straight
Hmm.
about it. And, I mean, I think if you trust the person, then you'll have some good results. But
Yeah.
just talk to them and don't be shy about interviewing people and asking them questions. So,
Very good. Thank you so much. Where can
yeah,
people follow you, find you, and keep up with your updates?
sure, sure. So, I'm new to the Instagram world, but you can find me on Instagram at Jack D. Schaefer. And I'm also Jack Schaefer on Facebook. My clinic is Mountain West Wellness on Facebook.
Okay.
And Parting Clouds is Parting Clouds Taoist Education on both Facebook and Instagram. So you can always check out my website. It's mountainwestwellness.com. And, so you can sign up for my newsletter there or follow me on any of those other places. Most things that are up to date are on the socials. That's usually where I put things. So
Awesome. And we're going to link them down below so people can find you easily and follow you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, and really thank you for all that you're giving back to humanity. I think it's so needed, And yeah, I would love to have you back in the future and talk about parting clouds and a little bit deeper on Taoism, if that sounds good to you.
Anytime. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I'd be glad we can talk about Taoism as much as you want to.
That's awesome. For our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment down below. Let us know what you thought. Do you agree, disagree? Are you going to try Chinese medicine or Qigong or acupuncture? And like and subscribe. And I will see you next week. I want to thank all of our Patreon members for supporting the podcast and making all of this so possible. When you join the Patreon for just $3 a month, you support the learning and continuous programming of this podcast. Join today to get insights on before and after conversations, extra footage, and extra episodes. Join today on Patreon.